The Baal Cycle, Story Edition. A story from ancient Ugarit. Original story adaptation based on the surviving Ugaritic text. Not a word-for-word modern translation. More than 3,000 years ago, on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, scribes pressed a remarkable story into clay tablets. It was the story of Baal, the storm god. A story of divine kingship, rivalry, battle, death, and return. The tablets were discovered among the ruins of the ancient city of Ugarit, in what is now Syria. Although parts of the story have been damaged or lost, enough survives for us to follow one of the great mythological narratives of the ancient Near East. In this telling, we will present the Baal Cycle as a continuous story. This is not a word-for-word reading of any modern published translation. Instead, it is a narrative reconstruction based on the surviving Ugaritic story. The characters, major events, conflicts, and sequence of the myth remain faithful to the ancient tablets. Repeated passages and difficult ancient phrasing have been adapted into smoother modern English so the story can be enjoyed as spoken narration. Where the original tablets are broken or unclear, we will avoid pretending that the missing words are known. In some places, the story will simply move from the last surviving event to the next part that can reasonably be understood. We will also avoid adding later legends or modern theories to the original tale. Those comparisons can be explored separately. For now, our purpose is simpler. To hear this ancient story again. To imagine the courts of the gods, the thunder of Baal, the challenge of the sea, and the shadow of death. And to experience, as closely as we can, a story first told thousands of years ago. This is the Baal Cycle. And our story begins among the gods. A note for listeners: the ancient text is preserved on 6 principal tablets known today as KTU 1.1 through KTU 1.6. The surviving poem is not complete. Clay has broken away, lines have disappeared, and some Ugaritic words remain uncertain even to specialists. For that reason, this version should be heard as a faithful story adaptation, not as a scholarly translation. No modern English translation has been copied into this script. The wording is newly written for narration. The story follows the surviving sequence and uses the ancient characters and major events, while compressing repeated formulas and avoiding invented dialogue in places where the tablets are lost. The names are written without most scholarly marks so that text-to-speech software can handle them more easily. For pronunciation, Baal may be read as Baal. Yam sounds like Yam. Mo sounds like Mot. Anat as Anat. El is simply El. Asherat may be read as Ashirat. Kothar wa Kasis may be read as Kothar wa Kasis. Zaphon may be read as Zaphon. Shapash may be read as Shapash. Part 1. The sea demands a throne. Before Baal possessed a palace, before his thunder rolled from the heights of Zaphon, the order of the divine world was unsettled. At the head of the gods stood El, the aged father and judge. His dwelling lay far from the noise of cities, at the sources of the rivers, amid the deep waters from which the world seemed to rise. There the gods gathered. Among them was Yam. His name meant sea. Yam was not the quiet sea seen on a clear morning from the coast of Ugarit. He was the power of the sea without restraint, deep water, flood, surge, and the force that could swallow ships and shorelines alike. He was also called river, another image of overwhelming water. Yam wanted kingship. The beginning of the surviving poem is damaged, and the exact negotiations cannot be completely recovered. But the direction of the story is clear. El favors Yam's claim and gives him royal standing. Yam is permitted to demand submission from his rival. That rival is Baal. Baal is the storm god, the rider on the clouds, the power of thunder, lightning, wind, and rain. To the people of a land that lived by fields, orchards, herds, and seasonal rain, the storm was not merely weather. It was life arriving from the sky. But in the assembly of the gods, Baal does not yet possess uncontested kingship. Yam decides to change that. He sends messengers to the divine council. They travel to El's assembly and stand before the gathered gods. They do not bow. They do not lower themselves before the divine family. They speak with the authority of a king who believes his command will be obeyed. Their demand is simple. Baal must be surrendered. Baal and those who serve him are to be handed over to Yam. A strange silence falls over the assembly. The gods lower their heads. No one rushes to challenge the demand. No one announces that Yam has gone too far. Baal looks around him and sees fear. He rebukes the gods for bowing before the messengers. Then his anger rises. He reaches for a weapon and moves against the envoys. But Anat and Aphtart seize him and hold him back. Messengers, even arrogant messengers, are not the enemy they carry words for. The challenge has been delivered. The answer will not be given in the council chamber. It will be given in battle. The surviving tablets break at important moments, but when the story becomes clear again, Baal is struggling against Yam. The sea is powerful. Baal, for all his force, cannot simply command the waters to yield. The battle turns against him, and the storm god faces an enemy who seems almost impossible to overthrow. Then another god enters the contest. Kothar wa Kassis is the divine craftsman, master of skill, invention, metalwork, and magical workmanship. When strength is not enough, skill creates another answer. Kothar fashions weapons for Baal. Not ordinary clubs, but named weapons made for this single contest. Baal takes the first weapon and strikes. Yam does not fall. The sea remains strong. Then comes the second weapon. Baal strikes again. This time the blow breaks Yam's resistance. The sea collapses beneath the storm god. Baal closes upon his rival, and the battle ends with Yam defeated. Aphtart calls for the conflict to be finished. Yam is down. The challenger to Baal's power has been overcome. The meaning is unmistakable. Baal has defeated sea. Baal can claim kingship. But victory on the battlefield is not the same thing as being fully established as king. A king requires a house. Part 2. The god without a house. The victory over Yam is celebrated. There is food and wine. Music is heard. Baal is honored upon the heights of Zaphon, the mountain associated with his power. Yet something is wrong. Other gods possess dwellings. El has his ancient residence. Asherah, mother of the gods, has her place. The divine children have courts and houses of their own. Baal, who has defeated the sea, still lacks the architectural sign of kingship. He has power, but no palace. The tablets next preserve scenes involving Anat, one of the fiercest figures in Ugaritic mythology. Anat is Baal's sister and champion. She is capable of affection, loyalty, and joy, but she is also a goddess of terrifying violence. In one extraordinary section of the poem, she fights warriors in a scene of deliberate excess. The ancient poet describes a battlefield so savage that Anat wades through the evidence of combat before cleansing herself and returning to peace. Modern readers do not need to soften the image. The text wants Anat to be frightening. Yet when Baal sends word to her, his message is not a call for another war. He calls for peace in the land. He asks Anat to come to him on Zaphon because he has something important to reveal. When Baal's messengers approach her, Anat at first assumes that another enemy has appeared. She recalls the enemies associated with the sea and with monstrous chaos. She is ready to fight again. But the problem is not another monster. The problem is Baal's status. He has no house. Anat understands immediately what that means. She goes to El. Her approach is not timid. Anat is capable of threatening even the father of the gods. The surviving lines mix menace, argument, and formal praise. Beneath all of it is one demand. Baal must be given a dwelling like the other gods. El listens, but the matter is not settled at once. Baal therefore turns to another path. If El will not be moved by Anat alone, perhaps Asherah can persuade him. Asherah is the great mother among the gods, associated with El and with the divine family. Her favor matters. Baal sends for Kothar wa Kassis, not this time to forge weapons, but to prepare magnificent gifts. The craftsman works precious metals into objects worthy of a goddess. Baal and Anat bring the gifts to Asherah. At first she is cautious. Why has Baal come bearing treasure? Why is Anat beside him? What do they want? The answer, once again, is the same. Baal has no house. He has won a kingdom but lacks a royal dwelling. Asherah accepts the case. She prepares for a journey to El. The old god lives at the source of the rivers, in the mysterious region of the deep. Asherah travels there with Anat accompanying her. El sees Asherah approaching. His mood brightens. He welcomes her with food and drink and speaks to her warmly. Then Asherah makes the request. Baal is king. The gods recognize his power. The storm that comes from him waters the earth. His voice is heard in the clouds. His lightning shines across the land. Yet the one who sends rain has no house. El finally yields. A palace may be built for Baal. The decision changes everything. Anat carries the news back to Zaphon. Baal will have a house. The god who conquered sea will finally possess the seat of a king. Part 3. The Palace on Zaphon. Baal wastes no time. Supplies are gathered. Silver and gold are brought in abundance. Cedar is taken from the mountains. And Kothar wa Kassis is summoned once more. The divine craftsman comes to Baal's table, eats and drinks, and hears the command. Build a palace. Build it upon Zaphon. Build a dwelling worthy of the storm god. Kothar agrees, but he asks Baal an unexpected question. Should the palace have a window? Baal refuses. No window. Kothar asks again. Baal again says no. Why Baal objects is not completely preserved. The damaged lines have produced more than one interpretation. What matters for the story is that the craftsman believes the window will be necessary. Kothar tells Baal that the storm god will remember his words. Then the work begins. Cedar is brought from the mountains. The palace rises. Fire is kindled inside the new structure and burns for days. On the seventh day the flames die down, and the metals of the palace have been transformed. Silver and gold appear as solid parts of the magnificent house. Baal rejoices. He has a palace. He gives a great feast and summons the divine family. The gods eat. The gods drink. Baal sits within the house that marks his rule. He is no longer merely a warrior who defeated a rival. He has become a king with a royal court on Zaphon. The story then moves through another damaged section. Baal ranges through cities and settlements, asserting his strength. When he returns to his palace, the old question of the window is raised again. This time Baal agrees. Kothar opens the window, and through that opening the nature of Baal's kingship is revealed. Baal gives forth his voice. Thunder rolls from the palace. The earth trembles. The mountains shake. The peoples below hear the storm god from the heights. The window is not merely an architectural detail. It is the opening through which Baal's power reaches the world. The god of rain has his house. The king has his throne. The thunder has a doorway into the sky. For a moment, Baal appears secure. But the Baal cycle does not end with the defeat of sea. A second power remains beyond Baal's command. A power older than any palace. A power that no king can ignore. His name is Mo, Death. Part 4. The Mouth of Death. From his palace, Baal looks toward a realm very different from Zaphon. Mo does not rule from a shining mountain. His domain lies below. The ancient poem imagines the entrance to his world beyond forbidding mountains, down into the earth, toward a place described with images of mud, pit, decay, and desolation. Mo is death, but the Ugaritic poet gives death a body. Most terrible of all is his mouth. It stretches with impossible vastness. Mo consumes. That is what death does. Baal sends messengers toward him. The exact tone of Baal's first message is partly obscured by damage, but the confrontation quickly becomes unmistakable. Baal has proclaimed kingship among gods and people. Mo will not quietly accept a world in which the storm god speaks as though every power must answer to him. The messengers descend toward death's country. Mo hears Baal's words. His reply is furious. He reminds Baal of the enemies already overcome. The sea, the serpent, the forces defeated by the storm god and his allies. But Mo is not Yam. Death does not intend to be struck down by a club and forgotten. He invites Baal to descend. Not as an honored king. As food. The mouth of death will receive him. The threat works. For perhaps the first time in the story, Baal is afraid. The conqueror of sea trembles before Mo. He sends back a message of submission. Baal, king on Zaphon, calls himself the servant of death. Then the tablets become badly damaged. The surviving words are difficult, and this part of the story has been interpreted in different ways. There are obscure references to Baal's preparations before entering the underworld. Rather than fill the missing space with a modern invention, our story will do what the clay tablets force every reader to do. We cross the break. When the story becomes clear again, Baal has gone down. The storm god has entered the realm of death. Soon, messengers arrive at El's dwelling. They have searched. They have found Baal. He lies dead. The rider on the clouds has fallen. The god whose voice shook the mountains is silent. Part 5. The Mourning of the Gods. When El hears that Baal is dead, the father of the gods descends from his throne. He sits upon the ground. He covers himself with the signs of mourning. He places dust upon his head. He grieves openly and violently, performing rites of sorrow that would have been recognizable in the ancient Near East. The death of Baal is not treated as the loss of a minor god. The divine order has been broken. The storm has died. Anat also searches for Baal. Her grief is as intense as her rage. With the aid of Shamash, the sun goddess, Baal's body is brought back toward Zaphon. Shamash is uniquely suited to help. Every day the sun crosses the world of the living. In Ugaritic imagination she also has access to the regions below. She can move where other gods cannot easily go. Baal is mourned upon his mountain. Anat offers sacrifices in his honor. But grief does not solve the problem of kingship. The throne cannot remain empty. El and Asherot consider another god. Athtar is chosen to try Baal's seat. Athtar ascends Zaphon. He sits upon the throne. And immediately the image becomes almost humiliating. The throne does not fit him. He cannot fill Baal's place. The seat is too great. Athtar himself recognizes it. He steps down. The episode is brief, but its purpose is powerful. Baal may be dead, but Baal cannot simply be replaced. His kingship belongs to him in a way that cannot be reproduced by putting another divine body on the same throne. Meanwhile, Anat's grief hardens into determination. She goes looking for death. Part 6. Anat against death. Anat searches for Mo. When she finds him, she demands her brother. Give Baal back. Mo does not deny what happened. He describes himself wandering the earth with the hunger of death. And he tells Anat that he found Baal. Then Mo uses the image that defines him. He swallowed him. To Mo, the storm god was something consumed. Anat does not accept the answer. Time passes in the poem, compressed by the old poetic formulas. Then Anat seizes death. What follows is one of the most unforgettable scenes in ancient myth. She attacks Mo as though death itself were grain to be processed. She cuts him. She winnows him. She burns him. She grinds him. She scatters what remains. The imagery moves from battlefield to harvest and from execution to agriculture. Death is treated like something that can be chopped, crushed, sifted, and sown. This is not merely a duel between two warriors. Anat symbolically dismantles death, and then the poem breaks again. When the story resumes, El receives a dream. In the dream, the heavens are rich again. The land flows with abundance. Oil comes from the sky. The streams run with sweetness. El understands the sign. If the world is becoming fertile again, then Baal must be alive. The father of the gods rejoices. The storm has not vanished forever. Baal lives. Shamash is called upon to search for him. Once again the sun becomes the link between worlds. And beyond another damaged stretch of clay, Baal returns. Part 7. The Return of Baal. The poem does not give us a modern resurrection scene. There is no single preserved moment in which Baal opens his eyes while the narrator explains exactly how he escaped death. The tablets leave us with something stranger and older. Baal was dead. Then the signs of life returned. Then Baal was alive again. The storm god reappears and reasserts his power. The land is no longer abandoned to death. The throne on Zaphon has its king again. But Mo is not gone forever either. Death returns. This is one of the deepest ideas in the story. Anat can cut death apart. She can burn him. She can grind him and scatter him. But death comes back. Mo remembers what Anat did to him, and he blames Baal for the humiliation. He demands satisfaction. He wants compensation from Baal's own divine family. A large part of the exchange is damaged, and the surviving passage is difficult. At one point Mo accuses Baal of a terrible deception involving Mo's own brothers. Whatever has happened in the missing lines, the result is clear. The conflict begins again. Baal and Mo meet in combat. This time there is no magical weapon that ends the struggle at once. They collide like powerful animals. They strike. They grapple. They throw one another down. Death is strong. Baal is strong. Neither can easily destroy the other. And that, perhaps, is the point. Storm and death are not like two mortal soldiers who can settle a war by killing the opponent once. They are powers built into the world imagined by the poem. Their struggle reaches a deadlock. Then Shamash speaks. The sun goddess warns Mo. El now supports Baal. If Mo continues the struggle against the storm god, he risks the judgment of the father of the gods himself. The warning changes the contest. Mo backs away. He acknowledges Baal's royal place. Death is not destroyed, but death yields the throne. Baal remains king upon Zaphon. The cycle closes not with a universe in which death has vanished, but with an order in which death no longer possesses the kingship that belongs to the storm god. And the final surviving lines turn toward Shamash, the sun, whose path touches both the living and the dead. The story that began with a struggle over kingship ends with the divine order restored. Sea has been defeated. A palace has been built. Death has taken Baal. Anat has attacked death. Baal has returned. Death has returned. And at last, through combat, negotiation, and the decree of El, Baal's kingship stands. Epilogue. What kind of story is the Baal Cycle? The Baal Cycle is sometimes summarized as a simple nature myth. Rain defeats the sea, disappears during a dry season, and then returns. That interpretation has a long history, and the poem certainly uses the language of rain, fertility, drought, abundance, and the life of the land. But the surviving text is richer than a weather diagram. It is also a story about kingship. Yam seeks authority. Baal defeats him. Baal cannot fully possess royal status until he receives a palace. The opening of that palace allows his thunderous voice to reach the world. Then Mo challenges the apparent completeness of Baal's rule. Even the storm king must face death. The poem is also a story about limits. Baal can defeat sea, but he fears death. Anat can destroy death's body, but death returns. Mo can swallow Baal, but Baal returns. Neither life nor death permanently erases the other. And above the struggle stands El, whose recognition still matters even after Baal has demonstrated extraordinary power. For the people who heard the poem in ancient Ugarit, these figures belong to a living religious world. Baal was not a fictional superhero to them. The storm, the sea, the sun, the fertile earth, the royal court, and death itself were experienced through a religious imagination very different from that of most modern listeners. We should therefore resist turning the poem into something it is not. It is not a later biblical story. It is not a Greek myth with different names. It is not evidence for a modern theory simply because one image resembles an image found elsewhere. It is an Ugaritic work from the late Bronze Age, preserved in a Northwest Semitic language on clay tablets from the city of Ugarit. Its importance lies partly in its age, but its real power lies in the fact that, after more than 3,000 years, its central images remain immediately understandable. The sea that refuses control. The king who wants legitimacy. The house that proves authority. The terrifying mouth of death. The grief of those left behind. The hope that life will return. And the recognition that victory over death is never as simple as one final blow. That is the world of the Baal Cycle. What the tablets tell us. The Baal Cycle is conventionally preserved as KTU 1.1 through KTU 1.6. KTU 1.1 and 1.2 preserve the conflict involving Yam, the sea, and Baal's rise over him. KTU 1.3 and 1.4 preserve the Long Palace episode, Anat's actions, the appeal to El, Asherot's intercession, and the construction of Baal's royal house. KTU 1.5 and 1.6 preserve the conflict with Mo, Baal's death or descent into death's power, mourning, Anat's attack on Mo, Baal's return, Mo's return, and the final confrontation. The division into a smooth three-part story is useful, but the tablets themselves contain gaps, uncertainties, repeated formulas, and scenes whose exact relationship remains debated. The poem is written in Ugaritic, a Northwest Semitic language written with an alphabetic cuneiform script. The tablets come from Ugarit, the ancient city at modern Ras Shamra on the Syrian coast. Excavations began in 1929 after the site's accidental discovery the previous year. A colophon at the end of KTU 1.6 names the scribe Ilamilku. Scholars continue to discuss his precise date and the relationship between his written version and older oral or literary traditions. The Baal Cycle should therefore be treated as an ancient text with a recoverable narrative, but not as a perfectly preserved modern book.